What's good, guys? Over the years, there's been a lot of great teams that failed to win the championship for various reasons. I was going to keep this exclusively to teams that made the finals, but there were a lot of spectacular teams that didn't make the finals that likely would have had they gotten there. I'm focusing solely on the 2010s, since I didn't get to watch a lot of the other teams, and there's a lot of great teams in NBA history that didn't win. Without further ado, let's hop in. Starting off the list, I have at number 10, the 2013 Oklahoma City Thunder. This was a really good Thunder team that continued to grow in the Western Conference. They lost Harden in the previous season since the Thunder office didn't want to give Harden the full money, but Westbrook and Durant started to finally click together. They were the first seed where they went 60-22 together in a tough Western Conference, featuring the grit and grind Grizzlies, the Lob City Clippers, and a really strong Spurs team. Durant was affirming his elite scoring prowess and superstar status. Westbrook was continuing to improve and make himself a superstar, and Serge Ibaka was at his best, leading the league in blocks and making all defensive first team. This Thunder team ended up facing James Harden and the Rockets in the first round, where Patrick Beverley crashed into Russell Westbrook's knee, causing him to miss the remainder of the season. The Thunder moved past the Rockets. They failed to defeat the Memphis Grizzlies in the second round without Westbrook. This Thunder team was really good, given that KD and Russ were 24 each, but unfortunately Westbrook caught the injury bug, which ultimately prevented the Thunder from advancing any further. At 9, I have the 2013 Memphis Grizzlies. This team was at the peak of the grit and grind era for the Grizzlies. This team was full of beast defenders all across the board. Marc Gasol was the Defensive Player of the Year, Mike Conley was an all-defensive team member, Tony Allen is synonymous for his defensive ability, and Zach Randolph added the toughness and grit on top of everything else. This team was an all-time great defensive team, holding opponents to 89.3 points per game, which is the lowest since the 2004 Pistons. The Grizzlies finished 56-26 for the 5th seed in a tough Western Conference. The Grizzlies dispatched the Clippers and the Thunder in the first couple rounds, but the Spurs were too much for them to overcome, and they ended up getting swept in the Western Conference Finals. This Grizzlies team was really underrated, but they were a really solid team that were probably one of the best defensive teams of this entire decade. At number 8, I have the 2011 Miami Heat. Not 1, not 2, not 3. This Heat team was insanely hyped from the start. There was speculation that they could even go 73-9 before the season. LeBron was the reigning MVP, D-Wade was still in his prime, and Bosh was still one of the best bigs in the league. This team was really solid, but I think it took a little bit of time for them to fully figure out how to play together. They ended up going 58-24 with the third best record in the NBA. They dominated the East playoffs throughout, defeating the MVP of the league Derrick Rose and the Chicago Bulls. Then came the NBA Finals. LeBron's absolute worst playoff series. The Mavericks absolutely stunned the Heat juggernaut in their first year together. LeBron vanished in most of the games, including an 8-point finals game where he was afraid to post up JJ Barea. He also got outscored by Jason Terry. So as bad as this finals was for LeBron, he needed this finals meltdown to become the player he is today. That summer, LeBron actually learned some post moves with Hakeem Olajuwon, which helped him in the post and helped him considerably for the rest of his career. That Heat team bounced back huge afterwards, but losing this one is still somewhat of a stain on LeBron's legacy. At number 7, I have the 2013 San Antonio Spurs. This was a really tough decision since the Spurs did make the finals. It was between the 2016 Spurs and the 2013 Spurs, but I ultimately placed the 2016 Spurs higher than the 2013 Spurs. This Spurs team won 58 games in the West, which was really good for the second seed in the West behind Oklahoma City. They managed to sweep the Lakers and the Grizzlies while they were taking to 6 games against a very young Warriors team. The finals that year was one for the ages. The Spurs and the Heat went back and forth early on in that series before the Spurs took a 3-2 lead. Game 6 was incredible, obviously. We all know about Ray Allen's infamous shot to tie the game. I think Kawhi missing that one free throw at the end of the game was a huge miss that would have sealed the championship for the Spurs, regardless of whether or not Ray hit that shot. And that Game 6 loss seemed to mentally demoralize the Spurs, and they let a sure thing slip right out of their hands. Duncan was still an all-star, Manu and Tony weren't fully up there in age yet, and Kawhi was still pretty raw in his talents, but this Spurs team was still an amazing squad that came up short by a few factors. At number 6, I have the 2016 San Antonio Spurs. This Spurs team was one of the best Spurs teams in recent memory. Tim was in his last season, while Kawhi was just becoming a true superstar. The Spurs were right behind the 73-win Warriors all season. One of the biggest reasons that the Warriors had to chase 73 wins is because the Spurs were right on their tails all season long for that 1 seed. That Spurs team tied the 1986 Celtics record of 40-1 for the most home wins in a regular season. Their only home loss in the regular season was against the 73-win Warriors. They were a really great team all throughout the regular season, where they ended up as the 2nd seed after winning 67 games. Kawhi finished 2nd in MVP voting that year, while also winning his 2nd Defensive Player of the Year award in a row. Once the playoffs rolled around, everyone was expecting a legendary Western Conference Finals featuring the Warriors and the Spurs. This squad was 1st in defensive rating and 4th in offensive rating, holding teams under 100 points per game on average. They swept Memphis in the first round, and it looked like they were going to handle the Thunder after winning Game 1 by 32 points. But afterwards, they ended up losing 4 out of the next 5 games. This team was poised to pull off a legendary series against the Warriors, but the Thunder had other plans. Durant, Westbrook, and the rest of the Thunder managed to limit most of the Spurs' original Big Three. With Duncan on his last legs, and the remainder of the roster being fairly old compared to Durant and Westbrook in their primes, the Thunder shocked the Spurs and defeated them in 6 games. At number 5, I have the 2016 Oklahoma City Thunder. This Thunder team was really underrated since there was a lot of tension on the Spurs, the Cavs, and the Warriors during that season. This Thunder team ended up going 55-27 in a really strong Western Conference. Durant and Westbrook were both consensus top 5 players in the league, while Ibaka, Adams, and Kanter were all solid big men at the time. During the regular season, this Thunder team was fairly above average, but once the playoffs rolled around, they became a force to be reckoned with. They dispatched the Mavs in a competitive 5-game series until they came face-to-face with the Spurs. A lot of people had written off the Thunder after the Spurs blew the brakes off of them in Game 1, but they bounced back and won 4 out of the next 5 games. With Duncan on his last legs and the majority of the Spurs roster being well into their 30s, I think the Spurs kind of just got figured out by the Thunder's bigs. The Thunder had more stamina, and the Spurs had no match for Westbrook and Durant in their primes. This Thunder team was a beast defensively in the playoffs, and it showed as soon as they faced the Warriors. The Thunder gave the Warriors trouble all throughout the regular season, but the Warriors managed to pull off 3 wins in the regular season just on the magic of Steph Curry and a bunch of clutch plays down the stretch of most of those games. This wasn't the case in the playoffs. The Thunder attacked the Warriors from the beginning, and with Curry looking average, the Warriors fell deep into a 3-1 hole. The Thunder's bigs were just too much for the Warriors early on in the series, and with Curry seemingly hampered, it looked like the Thunder were going to shock the world and defeat the 73-win Warriors. After dropping Game 5, it seemed like the Thunder had everything under control with Game 6 at home, but of course, KD and Russ had one of their worst shooting nights on the same night, while Klay Thompson had one of the most legendary Game 6 performances of the decade. We all know what happened next. The Thunder blew the 3-1 lead, and KD joined the Warriors. The Thunder, by all accounts, should have won that series. Who knows what would have happened in the finals against Cleveland? Andre Iguodala even said that the Thunder were the best team in the playoffs that year, and since then, the Thunder had never made it past the first round, and they've lost all their stars in the process. Coming in at number 4, I have the 2017 Cleveland Cavaliers. Fresh off a historic finals victory, the 2017 Cavs had a bumpy regular season, as they usually do. They went through the typical struggles of most LeBron-led teams around the All-Star break. J.R. Smith injured one of his fingers and was sidelined for months. LeBron vocally expressed that the Cavs needed a playmaker, and there was of course the normal outside noise by the media with any LeBron-led team. The Cavs finished the regular season 51-31 for the second best record in the East behind the Boston Celtics. The Cavs were 3rd in offensive rating in the regular season, but they were only 21st in defensive rating. Once the playoffs rolled around, there was a legitimate concern about whether or not this Cavs team would be enough to compete in the East. The Cavs lost 4 straight heading into the playoffs before LeBron playoff mode was activated. The Cavs flipped the switch early in the series, sweeping the Pacers in a very close first-round matchup. Their offense spiked considerably with shooters around LeBron, and this Cavs team had the highest offensive rating of any playoff team in NBA history, with a rating of 119.9. They swept the Raptors and then went on to face the Celtics, who were led by an injured Isaiah Thomas. The Cavs' offensive domination was too much for the Celtics to bear. The Cavs went up by 50 in Game 2 at one point, and there was no looking back after that. They crushed the Celtics in 5, and LeBron advanced to his 7th straight finals. As historically great as this Cavs team was, the Warriors were even greater. The 2017 Warriors made the Cavs look so inferior despite the Cavs' domination of the East. Their defensive struggles were highlighted in the series when they shifted their focus to Curry and Thompson, leaving KD open constantly. The Cavs blew their chances at the end of Game 3 when the Warriors ended up ending the game on an 11-0 run, and despite a controversial and historic 3-point performance in Game 4, the Cavs were vanquished in 5 games. This Cavs team was really freaking good, but the Warriors with KD might just be the greatest team of all time, so there just wasn't much they could do. Without KD, the Cavs probably win that series in 5 or 6, but KD was just too much for them to have a chance. At number 3, I have the 2018 Houston Rockets. After the acquisition of Chris Paul, this Rockets team was insane offensively. Harden and Paul worked together beautifully, and Paul willingly took a back seat for Harden to go off all season. The Rockets went on a 14-game winning streak and a 17-game winning streak as well. The big three of Harden, Paul, and Capella were 50-5 when they all played together. The Rockets finished the season with a record of 65-17, but I seriously believe they could have won 70 games had everyone stayed together and stayed healthy all season. Harden raised his game yet another notch, which was enough for him to finally win the MVP award after coming in second so many times. The Rockets made a statement all year that they were built to dethrone the Warriors, and they got their chance in the playoffs. The Rockets disposed of the Timberwolves easily in the first round, and same with the Jazz in the second round. The Rockets were first in offensive rating in the regular season, and that deadly three-point shooting continued in the playoffs. With the East looking very lackluster outside of LeBron, the only thing standing in the Rockets' way was the Warriors. We all know what happens next. The Rockets take a 3-2 lead against the Warriors after some competitive games before CP3 goes down in Game 5 with a strained hamstring. Despite having double-digit leads at the end of both Game 6 and 7, the Rockets crumbled under the pressure. The 27 missed threes will haunt this team for a while if they never make the finals or win a title in the Harden era. That Rockets team was poised for the biggest upset since the 16 Cavs, but they just couldn't get it done. There is the notion to be raised that whether or not they could have won with CP3 healthy, but in the case of the Warriors, their best wing defender in Iguodala missed games 4, 5, 6, and 7. This Rockets team was amazing, and it took a lot of bad luck and the heroics of the Warriors to keep them from winning the championship. At number 2, I have the 2019 Golden State Warriors. I wasn't even sure if I should put this team here or not. They should have won by all accounts since their defeat was only due to injury. Regardless, I put them here anyways. I'll keep this short since this season just happened. After Boogie Cousins joined the Warriors, there was an insane amount of hype about the Warriors just being plain unfair. Fortunately for the league, Cousins never really got back on track with the Warriors. After the KD and Draymond stuff, the Warriors seemed shaky all season. Despite the uncertainty, the Warriors still had the highest offensive rating of any team in NBA history. In the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, KD was playing at a level we'd never seen from him before. He put the Warriors on his back for plenty of games when Steph was struggling offensively. The injuries started piling up after Boogie tore his quad. Klay and Steph rolled their ankles, and KD eventually suffered his calf injury against the Rockets. This Warriors team seemed hopeless without KD, but their championship pedigree showed up when they needed it most. Unfortunately, the injury bug just hit this team at the worst time after years of great fortune. I think majority of us agree that the Warriors would have beaten the Raptors pretty handily with KD fully healthy. There's a chance that they win the series with just Klay playing Game 3 and finishing Game 6. Injuries are a part of the game, and I guess the Warriors' injury luck kinda ran out at the end. They put up a great fight, but they just kept losing bodies along the way. At number 1, you all know, the 2016 Golden State Warriors. I think we all knew what number 1 was going to be. The 16 Warriors were one of the greatest teams of all time, and the greatest team in NBA history to not win the title. This team was absolutely exceptional. They broke records on a nightly basis all throughout the regular season, with Curry, Thompson, and Green all playing at the peak of their abilities. This team had a certain level of clutch ability that was a huge reason why they won 73 games. They would just find ways to win in the regular season down the stretch. All of this was achieved behind the greatness of Steph Curry. Curry put up arguably one of the greatest offensive seasons of all time, averaging 35-7 on 50, 45, 90% shooting. There was a certain level of magical feeling around this Warriors team that we may never see again. They felt nearly invincible in the regular season until the playoffs hit. Curry suffering an ankle injury in Game 1 against Houston, and Curry suffering a grade 1 MCL sprain against the Rockets in Game 4 essentially tainted this playoff run for me. Curry had some good games like his OT game against Portland, but he just didn't have that magic anymore on a nightly basis. OKC exposed the Warriors' center-oriented weaknesses, and with Curry playing average and Draymond on the verge of a suspension, the Warriors dug themselves into that 3-1 hole. We all know the rest. The Warriors come back from 3-1 down, only to eventually blow a 3-1 lead to the Cavs. Personally, I think the Warriors look so vulnerable because Curry just wasn't playing to his expectations. I think they win Game 5 against Cleveland if Draymond plays and Bogut doesn't get hurt. But there were so many factors that caused that team to lose the way they did. This Warriors team is still one of the greatest teams of all time, and they just came 5 points short of winning another title that would have solidified them as the greatest team ever. Those are my top 10 teams that didn't win the championship in the 2010s. The 2010s had some amazing teams that just came up short of winning the title. That's all for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Just in case the party gets rowdy, I brought my crew. I don't mind if y'all wanna fight me, just don't shoot. I see you got on all this